Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm joined again by Igor. Today, we're talking about events and how to get the most out of them, and also how to not have false expectations and hopes about what may be possible outcomes of events. Obviously, for a lot of entrepreneurs and businesses, events are one way to find clients or find potential business partners or just see what's happening. And in all of those cases, there are some nuances about how one can really make and get the best ROI from these things. So, Igor and I will be speaking about this today. We're going to this event next week called Elevate in Toronto, which we've both been to at least a couple of times, and I think we actually met at Elevate last year. So I'm excited to talk to Igor, and obviously wouldn't have been possible probably without that event. Yeah, and we're going to see what comes of this time. So without further ado, I'm going to open the conversation up. Igor, I think we can skip the intros, or did you want to do any?
I think we can skip the intros.
Perfect. Okay, so let's dive into it then. Events and how you feel about them, Igor. I think you have a lot of experience with events, so maybe you can start us off.
Well, maybe not like a lot of experience, but yeah, well, like several years in a row, I've been visiting events for my business for various places. Visited many web summits, many events in Toronto, like lots and lots of networking events, and yeah, I can speak for myself. I can speak a few words about that, and like first things first. The previous 2 years, we've actually spent 2 or 3. We've actually spent a lot of money on events. We visit about 4 or 5, like 4 maybe web summits. Uh, and we were flying to different. I was flying to Qatar. My business partner was flying to where, to Brazil somewhere. I don't remember. Maybe Rio. I was flying to Europe a few times. We were flying to Las Vegas. Apparently, we visited collision events in Toronto when they were happening. They're not happening anymore. Now it's in Vancouver. And we're going to Elevate next week. That's pretty much what sparked our discussion now. And what I can say is that there is such a trend that people spending money on events and going there often over exaggerate the importance of those events for their business. Like, you go there, you invest some money, you invest time, you invest efforts to prepare. For many of the events, for example, we made preliminary lead generation. So what we did, we were essentially researching. Fortunately, Web Summit had pretty convenient mobile application where you could research businesses presented there by industry. So we were researching leads. We usually prepared like about 100 people that we needed to approach at an event. And then you have the event for like 3-4 days, and like all day you're walking around and annoying people. And first of all, we actually prepared to those conversations. So when I approached them, I already knew what they're doing, at least generally, but I did look at their website. I know maybe who this person is. If it's the person that we found, maybe it's a different person. Then I at least know, for example, who is their CEO, who they are talking about. So I did have some information about them. So that usually helped. And you usually make lots of efforts because working like that all day is not easy, and anyone who tried to sell stuff at events would know that. And what I found difficult is then at the end of the day, after the event, not at the end of the event, after it already happened, after you had all those conversations, gathered all those business cards or not business cards, and made all those LinkedIn connections, and you seem to have talked to maybe 50, 60 out of those 100 that you generated in advance, to admit how it actually went. Because you go there and invest lots of time. And then after the event happens, after they had all those conversations, you can be very prejudiced in terms of how those conversations were actually going. And people at the events are usually nice. They talk to you nicely. They keep the conversation going. You ask them qualification questions. They are kind of responding in a positive manner that lead you through the conversation. And then you follow up with them after the event. Like maybe 10% of them reply to you after the event. Maybe another 5% reply to you after third or fourth or fifth follow up. And that is it. And our ROI from the events has, sincerely speaking, was pretty low. I mean, we always went away with like 50, 60 leads after the event, and then maybe one or two with them we had a meaningful conversation about the contract, and it doesn't mean that it ended up in a contract. And from some events, even you have all those 50, 60 leads, and then you end up with nothing, and all your follow up don't bring you anything. And I've talked to many other business owners and people doing sales at the event, specifically in B2B and specifically in consulting services. I understand like smaller services may be easier in this regard when you are selling what I do, and I provide software modernization and development services. And our like engagement with us, it's not a small deal. It's usually like several people full time a month. So that's like that's not a small bill. So it is not easy to take the decision for them on the go to hire us. It takes time, apparently. But in general, I've spoken to many business owners and other people who are doing sales at the events, and the common experience is that everyone returns and says how cool it was and how successful they were, but then the amount of contracts is kind of very close to zero. And everyone spends enormous amount of time and efforts and resources, money resources on the event, and most of them don't get anything out of the events, and still everyone lives in a bubble and saying that, oh yeah, visiting events is cool, let's keep doing this, it's there, look at this very cool web summit, everyone feels so successful there, and so on and so forth. So that's my experience generally. And again, I keep going to events. I cannot stop doing this. I still get valuable connections there. It doesn't mean that they're useless. They're not useless, but the expectations should be very realistic. So it's absolutely normal that you go to the event, you talk to 50 people, and don't get a single proper lead, even if you are qualifying them well, and even if you've been doing it for over a decade, like selling your service, you know how to sell your service. You still may not get anything out of the event because this is just their nature. And people, again, very often, usually people over exaggerate how successful they are at events.
I think that's a broader trend generally where people over exaggerate how well things work because they don't actually want to look at critically, like, what's the ROI here, right? And things that we enjoy, we tend to, be preferential to those things and say, no, this was great, Um, if people hate cold calling, they're like, oh yeah, cold calling doesn't work. And if they enjoy events, they're like, yeah, events work great. When in reality, cold calling may have better ROI than events. I'm not claiming it does. It depends on the situation. Um, but I think, like, for me, the broader theme, and this is part of our sort of this notion of being a bit contrarian, is that if you do what everybody else does, you will likely get poor results because you're competing in the same market for the exact same things. So guess how many people go to events hoping that they can find somebody who'll buy their stuff? Most people,
Yeah,
right?
most people
This
try
is
to sell you
not
something.
this is not rocket science. Like,
Yeah.
people go to events because they hope they can get some business out of it, right? That's not rocket science. So if you're going to the events, and especially the events where everybody else is going to, people where birds of a feather flock together, right? Especially even at these events. But birds of a feather do not sell to each other. And
Exactly.
birds of a feather compete with each other. So if you're going to get ROI from events, you have to do things that other people are not doing. Okay. So either you're going to try to sell a kind of product that not many people are selling, or maybe you're not really selling if you're looking for money and you're going to events, either by selling a product or by getting VCs to invest in your company, you're doing what most people are doing. Okay. So while you may have some luck in some results, if there's something extraordinary about what you're doing, something very different, uh, it's unlikely you're unlikely to be differentiated, and therefore you're unlikely to be anything but noise in the 50 follow-ups that are happening between you, between some person and all of the companies, and you're one of those 50, maybe more. And the idea that you're going to stand out, and the idea that is low, right? And people go to events, they have fun, they're in a different headspace, but when they go back to their life, they get busy, right? And they don't have even time, even if they genuinely enjoy talking to you. And doubts creep in. Did I really need it? Do I really need to buy something, et cetera, right? Um, so my recommendation is that if you are going to sell from events, I think you need to have a product that's you hopefully you can maybe you can offer a trial, maybe you can do other things. But I would really say like yeah. So as Igor and I were talking about earlier, if you're going to sell, go to events where people like you are not really going, right? And there is some need for what you do, right? And that you validated that. So that's like go to events that other people like you don't want to go to because they're not fun, right? And you may actually have a better shot of being able to sell. Or go to these events and just look to surface industry trends, maybe understand what your competitors are doing, maybe try to grow your LinkedIn audience a bit. Something I'm going to be looking to do is make some content this time, like turn the podcast into content and show some expertise and things like that. But you really, really like with everything else, like yeah, if you're competing in a commodity market in a commodity marketplace, your results are going to be not good. So
Yeah, I can give a few examples, like from real life that I had, where I saw which types of businesses are actually good at selling the events and which types are not, and why generally, like why a regular way how people sell at the events doesn't actually work. Like a good example that I can give, one of my friends in Switzerland, he provides services in basically LinkedIn and email. He what the service is about is like they're basically doing cold outreach, and his bill for a month is not very high. It's like 2K, 3K sometimes. It's not too much, and his service can be easily adjusted to sell pretty much any type of software product, any type of software product. So his qualification is pretty easy. As long as you have a software product that you sell online, obviously, where else would you sell it? He can do something for you. And again, since his bill is not very high and he can show very specific statistics, he was pretty successful at the events. So he usually went to some kind of conference every week or 2 weeks across Europe. And again, it's not far to drive in Europe. And he usually got like one, maybe two contracts from every conference after working there for the whole day for a couple of days, something like that. Again, this is not much that he literally invests, let's say, 1K or 2K in the event, and then he gets like a 1K, like a 2K contract out of it. But they pay it every month to him. And since he was doing it consistently over time, and his business kept going and kept growing, so he was fine. It wasn't the unicorn or anything like that, apparently, but it was pretty stable and planned manner how to grow your business through events, and it worked for him. Why it worked? Because his leads were at the events. So those people who were selling whatever software products they had, pretty much most of them needed some kind of cold outreach to sell their stuff, especially if they're doing B2B. That's it. And it worked. Again, when you have a bigger bill or something more specific that it's difficult to qualify your leads, the problem is like how you're going to do it at the event. Like you have two main ways to do it in a planned manner. Way number one, do lead generation in advance. Again, like we did, like you research the application, you see which businesses potentially can fit your profile, you find people on LinkedIn, then you go try to find those people or try it at least to talk to the company and get some connection to those people. The problem is those businesses go to that event not to buy something from you. And even if by chance they even may have a need, they're not willing to buy it from you at the event. And they're having a nice conversation and they're busy trying to sell their stuff to other people. And you are just, it's not like you're going and annoying them. Maybe they enjoy the conversation. Maybe you can tell them something valuable, but their goal at the event is to sell, not to buy. People generally don't go to events to buy. Like very, very seldom. Maybe some industrial stuff, like when they're looking for some machinery equipment. Again, I don't know much about this stuff, but in software, what I see, people don't go to events to buy. They go to events to show off, literally, to make new leads, maybe to speak, which goes into category of showing off. That is it, and to sell,
No,
not to buy, because you can you
I
can
think
find everything online.
this is fantastic. So what I tell people is, look, if you go to ask for money, you will have a bad time. If you go to give money, you'll have a good time,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So this is also what I tell people when they're looking for a job, right? And they go around asking everybody, do you have a job? I'm looking for a job. The problem with that is you're asking them for something everybody else is also asking them for, which is money. And it's like, why should I pay you, right? Because I'm giving you my money. If you instead convey value in a very confident way, and you can do, or you can say, I can do this for you, and like you can show me that you can do it, then I'm getting something, and my focus is first on like what I'm getting, right? So your friend who's in Europe, who's selling this 2K thing, he's charging money, but he's essentially saying directly, I will help you sell, right? I will help you sell. These are the numbers, these are the things, right? And it's not a lot that they're investing. And I'm sure he's got testimonials and stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, everybody wants more sales, everybody wants more money, right? And you usually have to pay some amount to get sales. But if there is an offer like that, it is still an open offer. Uh, your offer is a little bit more of a long-term return on investment, right? And it's a bigger investment with a longer time horizon to get the investment back. So it feels more to them like they're investing rather than getting money. They're investing in this process, right? They're spending money, and it will lead an ROI down the road if things work. But it would be something for them that they have to think about. So there are ways you could do that. You can invite people to an opportunity to come onto your podcast, for example. You can invite people an opportunity to come pitch to investors at a private event. Okay, and if you do things like that, you will get more demand than you can handle, because everybody is looking for a credible signal to make money. So if you have if you have a partnership, so one way you could do things, for example, that I can suggest is you partner with a firm that has money, an investment firm or something, and you say, look, we'll help you build your qualification process, or we'll have people find more deals on your behalf. And as part of the screening criteria, you also ask some questions that will help you identify if they're a potential prospect for you. So now if they've reached out to this VC and they've put their name into the pool, you can also reach out to them and say, hey, by the way, that kind of thing, right? But essentially, to get demand, you have to be offering something, not asking for something. And when you're at a car dealership and you're selling cars and people walk in, for them the car is an offer. If, on the other hand, you're a car salesman who goes to a random event and offers people car, you're asking them for money, right? Because their frame of reference is, in one frame is, I'm looking for a car, I'll pick any that works. In the other case, their frame of reference is, I'm not looking for a car, why are you asking me for money? So I think that's super important.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I wanted to add a point about how people meet each other, like where you meet people at the events and how it influences your communication with them. Like if you go to their booth, you don't really sell them anything at their booth, because their booth is where they sell. At least they try to. It's very difficult to sell at the event. But again, at least they try to. Your chance of selling them at their booth is almost zero. They are not there to buy anything, even if whatever you sell is very valuable. So it's very difficult. Another thing is you can meet them in some kind of lunch area or after party where they're usually much uh, more open to speak to you, and that is a leverage. You can speak to them more. You can speak to them longer. They are open to share more information. You can get some drinks with them during the after party, and they are more, again, they are more open. They share more stuff. You can get more information. Again, negotiations about getting information, right? And but the problem is that those are random encounters. So when you go to the booth, you at least know where you're going. When you're meeting someone at the lunch or the after party, it's absolutely random person. You can be lucky and you can get someone valuable, but you may not be lucky and not get someone valuable. And then you can be talking to people nicely, having drinks and have so much fun, but the ROI is zero. ROI is
Yes.
zero. That's the problem. Another thing which can be a leverage, again, it doesn't really work that well at the events unless you're going to the same events every half a year and people know you there and you've been there for like 5 years. In this case, it will work as well. Is when you're going to certain networking, is if you are meeting same people at the networking, they start knowing you better and then they can introduce you to somebody. They can introduce you to an event if there is somebody to introduce. In that case,
Right.
yeah, that might work. And you can talk to them, say, hi, Jim, like, have seen you
Yeah.
here for previous 5 years, and he will actually be able to share some valuable information. He can tell that his friend came here for the first time, and he may be available. That is a good thing. Again, that is a good thing, but that's the matter of calculating how much time you need to actually get those connections. And such connections are easier and faster to get at networking events, like smaller networking events, maybe industry specific networking events, rather than big conferences, because conferences, they happen less often and they're much more expensive. A business
Yes.
networking event you can get for $50 or even less, and they may happen every couple of weeks, and you can get a network around you much faster. So again, this is something to consider.
I think that's a very, very good points. I think that's kind of like I think that's partly like like so there's events like Tech Toronto and things like that, which are happening twice a month, once a month, things like that. If you're going repeatedly, you do see the same people, and when you have warm connections, then business can happen. But I think, like you're saying, I think conferences versus those are very different, and I think that's where your geography becomes important. If you live in a city kind of place, and you can go to events, some that are regular events, I think that's a much better way to expand your network in an effective way that'll convert. I think conferences are these nice one-off things where you meet some people, you have some conversations, you learn some things, you see some trends and things like that. But the ROI is more difficult to calculate. I've had better success with small private things. So I was in this like private equity group called Epic, and there I got a lot of contacts, and all of the contacts I followed up with, and a lot of them we got on calls after. And so that was very, very, that converted well. But the majority are not working that way.
What do you like about vibe on such events? Like what do you like, what do you not like? I'll, like, after you reply, I'll give you one interesting comparison.
So when you say vibe, like,
The atmosphere, like how do you feel at the events? How do you, like, which events you like, which events you don't like? What can you compare them to from?
that's a really good question, actually. Um, Probably I enjoy most events. Um, because I'm an extrovert and I enjoy the atmosphere, and there's new people and everybody there wants to talk about business stuff, right? Um, on the other hand, I find that if there's too much of a speaker-dominated event where everybody's sitting down quietly and this person's talking, I don't enjoy those things at all. Like, because I can sit and listen to one person talk for half an hour, maybe two people talk for up to an hour, but if it's more than that, I lose. And sometimes they'll have a speaker talk for 45 minutes, and they'll do another fireside chat for another 45 minutes, an hour, and the person talks so slowly, and nobody else can do anything but sit there. I think that's highly unproductive. I'm like, I could have met so many people in this period of time. So I prefer events that are more networking centric. And even when I go to conferences like Elevate and stuff, I do not spend my time listening to the speakers much. If there's last year or the year before, there was Jeffrey Hinton who was talking, so I listened to him. He was perhaps the only speaker I listened to, except on day one when the president of Shopify was talking, and Chris Hadfield was interviewing him. Like I listened to like two speakers, like the whole event. You know, I did not spend my time listening to speakers that much. They're meant to be experts and show you the way, but yeah, sure, they know some things, but it's not like life-changing material mostly. I think what's more life-changing possibly is meeting somebody who could convert into something, and I have met some pretty cool people from these things. Uh, but yeah, I think for me personally, I would rather be talking to people. That's and I think in the I also prefer events that have after parties that have been organized, and they're again not too loud and like a club, because while that's nice for some individuals, I think you don't really get to convert anything from those.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like I never understood this when people are organizing business events in a club and the music is so loud that you cannot hear anybody. It's horrible. I literally do not understand it. I myself approached the barman several times asking them, "Can you make the music lower? Can you make the volume lower? It's too much. I cannot speak to people." And like it's such a weird situation where you see that people are actually confused by that as well, but they're kind of
Yes,
shy of speaking about it.
absolutely.
We all of us literally paid $20 to come here and present ourselves with a certain probability of finding interesting business connections, and we want to have
Yes,
good acoustics around. We need to speak,
absolutely.
and you go there and the music is so loud you cannot do anything, and you're kind of staying shaking your head and like, holy crap, why did I even come here? And
Yeah,
you're trying to have, you see that you have an interesting lead, you want to talk to that lead, but it doesn't work out.
absolutely
Yeah, yeah.
right.
And
And
yeah, let me finish, please. And I have an interesting comparison. I used to participate in lots of sports events and festivals. Like I did medieval fencing, and I was participating in lots of fencing competitions and medieval festivals, like cool events where you have people wearing weird clothes and doing weird stuff, but everyone is happy and a little drunk. And you go to such event, like I used to go to such events pretty often. Like I went to some events like 5 7 times a year for about like 9 years in a row. And you meet certain people only there, you don't see them anywhere else, and you kind of start to to know them, and you become their friends. And every time you come there, if for example it's a competition, if it's not even a competition, if it's just like a festival, you are still showing something. Like it's not like you're showing off, but you're still showing something. You are showing your skills at a competition, you're showing your costume if you are just participating in some costume thing, whatever. uh, and this is a very similar vibe to IT conferences. It's like when I went to several conferences, I felt that it's the same vibe. You meet those people, you're not exactly friends to them, but you are happy to see them. You are happy to share your story for the previous, whatever, half a year that you haven't seen them. And it always seems that you talked to them yesterday. Something like that. Like you see them and it seems like this year didn't even pass. It was just like yesterday, maybe a week ago, or things like that. And that's why I asked about the vibe. For me, the vibe of um, IT conferences is very similar to the vibe of like festivals and sports competitions combined with festivals, where you meet those people from time to time. You compete with them, by the way. Again, it's like your competitors. You're still happy to see them. Anyways,
yeah, no, I think those are, and I honestly think it's, yeah, I think there's also an important point around like when you go like in a more relaxed atmosphere, or when people are not, don't have their guard up, that's when there are like, you might talk less about business, but more business comes from it, because there's a real conversation happening between two people, and there is at least some degree of like, the worst thing in sales is if somebody's on the defensive or they're hiding stuff from you. Like you're never going to sell in those situations. So if you can have situations where there's your hobbyists together, or there's some way where you can actually have genuine conversations, those convert a lot better. um, and people, even if you don't talk, as I said, about business as much, and even if you have slower, fewer conversations, I find the conversions are better because there's less pretending happening. um, and that's like one of the other things at these conferences is everybody's trying to be impressive because they're all trying to sell stuff or get investment. So they're all putting on their masks, and you're not getting the real data from people about really what's going on, what are their actual needs, and things like that. Um, so you are not getting the correct impression, and they're also not presenting themselves in a way that's honest, and they're not open and receptive to you. So that's where, again, I think that finding ways around that is, I think, super, super important.
Yeah, yeah, but at the same time, with this vibe, um, first of all, when you have drinks with them after the event at the after party, they're much more open to talk to you. It's a nice thing to do, and this is the thing which you can actually get at the event, and this is absolutely the same like on sports events, absolutely 100% the same. You get more experience. Like when you go to events and you talk to people, and then like they become more open and they actually share their real stories, and you can hear things they are doing the same stuff you were doing, or maybe things they're doing and same stuff you were planning to do and still haven't started, and now they can tell you the outcome, or they can tell you how they approached it, or they can tell you like whatever happened to them. This is where you get experience. Again, when I did sports, we had this notion that you go to events to level up. You go to level up. It doesn't mean that you will win. No, most people don't. Only first to three places win, right? And there can be hundreds of people there. It's same stuff here. You go there, you don't. It's highly unlikely you're gonna sell anything. Maybe if you will, if you are, all power to you, cool. But it's highly unlikely. Most people don't sell it. But you can hear their stories, you can see the trends, you can see people doing silly stuff like you did a year ago. You can see people doing smarter stuff, and they tell you that, look, I did this silly crap, and then you understand that whatever he's explaining is exactly what you're doing right now. And he's telling you, look, and this is the outcome, and then you understand, oh crap, yeah, that's exactly the outcome. I didn't even think about it. And that's why, despite that you are not actually selling and it's not about successful success as people are usually trying to, and but you can still level up, you can still get very valuable experience there, and that's why we all continue doing this stuff. Essentially, it's like an investment in something unknown, but you know that when you go there, you may see the same people ask how their businesses were doing for the previous year. You can you may remember what they were telling you at that time, what they're telling you right now. You can see it's not difficult to check how their businesses are doing, so on and so forth, and you can see the trends. And despite and instead making all those mistakes yourself, you can get help from the community, and that may be a community of competitors, but that's still cool. You can still level up with that.
So I think that's like a good way to look at it. I also think that it's, I think, very close to what you said. It has to do with the fact that, like, when you go to an event, you feel like you're less crazy because as a business owner, you're mostly like like you're making decisions on your own or with a business partner. And you kind of, and the market is changing, and now AI is happening. All these different things are going on. Uh, Tariffs have been imposed, what are the implications, like all sorts of things are going on, right? And then when you are at this event, you hear other people have been experiencing the same things as you, and some of them have found solutions, some of them have not found solutions, but it helps you understand the bigger picture of where the market is, where the industry is, how things are looking right now for other people. And that's extremely valuable to get that data once in a while to kind of sync up with the rest of your community and just see what are the broader trends, and you start to understand that the what's happening in the bigger picture and how that's been impacting you. And I find is very useful for that, so I feel a lot less like, Igor, I've been surprised by this, right? I think we're all as entrepreneurs, we're exceptional people. We are people who defy norms. We do better than a lot of people are able to do. We do things that other people are unwilling to do, whatever. It's been a real revelation for me that almost all of the problems and almost all of the results that I've experienced in business are absolutely normal. In fact, it has been shocking to me to see how much almost everything is textbook. You know, um, that most of the experiences I've had in business are textbook experiences. They're not strange. They're not, and it doesn't seem that way because nobody around me has a business, right? My family doesn't have a business. My uh, friends that I went to, that I've met in earlier parts of my life, they don't have businesses. Most of them, right? So the things that I'm going through seem highly unusual to me, and then it's highly difficult to figure out if what I'm doing is correct or not correct because it all seems unusual and it all seems like, oh, it's only me who is to make these decisions. Am I making the then you go talk to other people and you're like, oh, this is absolutely normal. And oh, by the way, if had I known this thing, I could have done this other thing and I would have been saved this problem, which was an absolutely foreseeable, absolutely normal problem that other people have totally gone through before. But nobody in my life would know have a clue about it unless they're entrepreneurs, which is, the minority of people. So that sort of thing I've also experienced many, many times.
Yeah, yeah. People tend to solve problems in communities better than on their own. And that's why you go to, like, the event is a community. And again, that may be your competitors. They can be some completely unrelated businesses, whatever. It makes no difference. That's, by the way, your experience totally the same as mine. Sometimes you think you're doing total crap, you're pathetic, and like you're overwhelmed with problems, and then you go to such events, whatever events, and people are explaining having absolutely totally the same experience and even more frustrating and even longer than you had, and you understand that yes, you are making all those mistakes, you're still making all those mistakes, and they're still making all those mistakes. But as you say, it's a textbook example, it's okay, it's normal, and if they went through it, maybe you can go through it. And their experience can be very, even their negative experience can be very valuable to you. You can make some conclusions out of that, and it gives you some it's not motivation, but rather maybe some peace of mind that you see how to move forward, and all those obstacles that you face at the time, they're fine, they're normal, they are usual, and everyone must go through them, and you have to go through them. It's never a smooth path anyway. You must go through them, and again, for me personally, it just gives some peace of mind. It's like you understand it's hard, but it's doable, something like that. And that's not a bad thought to think.
And like with fencing and other things, it also helps you benchmark against other people, right? So it's like I've been, even in my first year in business, I thought I was not doing good and whatever. And I talked to a bunch of people who are doing much better than me later on in business. They said, "You've had an incredibly successful first year. How did you do that?" I didn't do any, and I'm like, "What? I'm doing like way better than like average." And in fact, I did. And I'm like, "Oh, this is a shot." It's like we don't even know what benchmarks we should be comparing to, because the representative sample in our heads is the media. Okay. And the media cherry picks the most successful stories and then cherry picks the most successful parts of their stories, right?
Yeah,
So it's the most
exactly.
successful companies and people and the most successful parts, just the highlights of it's like, so it's like the way Instagram is, but to a much greater extreme. So what happens is like you'll see these people who like scaled in like, if you look at Cursor, right, within 2 to 3 years, this thing is scaled to 100 million. You're like, man, like these guys scaled to 100 million in like 2, 3 years, and they had like 10 people. Like, how did they do that? And then they sold for like a billion, or Rinser, they were offering 3 billion for this thing, and like, how did they do that? Why could and, and and that is so not normal. It is so unusual. And I bet some of those founders, sometimes they're young. Look, the media loves the talent story. Okay. The media is always going to sell you the talent story. The majority of entrepreneurs who succeed, it's not their first company, right? And
Yeah,
they're not in their 20s anymore, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
exactly. And
even the ones who
it's
are
not 300, and it's not 1 billion
not
in
three.
3 years.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's not doing that. So most entrepreneurs are in fact struggling for cash, right? Are most entrepreneurs are barely above water, trying to keep up with the market. They're overworked, they're frustrated, they're confused, right? And they realize it's a battle that they have to fight for a long time to start to see success. It does not happen overnight. And even if it does happen overnight, guess what? The rest of the market comes and tries to eat your lunch, and you have to protect it. And that's extremely hard as well. Guess what happened to Cursor and Windsurf and all of these? Well, Claude Code happened, OpenAI Codex happened, and suddenly these companies, they were getting preferred pricing from these model providers. Well, they stopped giving them preferred pricing. Now they have to pay full price. Now, if you're paying full price for Cursor or for Claude Code, and maybe Claude Code's actually a bit cheaper because it's Anthropic's own product. Maybe you switch, right? So these companies, they scaled really fast, but other people started to eat their lunch. They all are having to exit, the business. So people don't talk about those things. People just talk about the highlights and the success story. Just today, Microsoft announced a new CEO who's going to be stepping in on the business side, and Satya Nadella is just going to focus on technicals, right? I'm sure this because Microsoft is going through some struggles. That's been reported also in the news. But you will not hear that story. You will hear the story of this like crazy giant company that's going from one success to another success. Um, because we love to celebrate the winners. We love the Usain Bolts of the world. We love the Michael Phelps of the world, the Roger Federers. We don't look at the 99.9% who fail. And many of them fail for perfectly, they weren't good enough. And many of them failed even though they were good enough. Maybe they got injured, right? Nobody remembers the basketball player who's more talented than Michael Jordan and LeBron James and Kobe Bryant, but had a bad injury and couldn't recover his career, and it's just had to leave the game. Like nobody remembers that person. Nobody knows their name. Nobody ever will. So there's so much more to that story, and so getting to the place of talking to other real entrepreneurs and seeing also how the media misportrays what are the important parts of the journey, what you actually need to be focused on, it's so useful because unfortunately you're competing not just with the market, you're also competing with what's in your head where you're supposed to be, and that's coming from the media. And you need to get real stories and real experiences to get out of that, because otherwise, and that's also why I'd recommend not just like sitting there and listening to speakers on stage talk about their wonderful journey. Talk to real people around you. You learn a lot more talking to them um, than just the people on stage, some of whom will say useful things, but many of whom, uh, some of them may have gotten lucky, frankly, and the ones who didn't, they're not going to talk about the hard parts. Okay. I remember I was in this conference in Montreal and there were some wonderful speakers, and I talked to one of them. I said, I really liked your talk. It was really good. And I was like, you made this joke about like sleeping on the couch or something or on the street. You weren't sure because you hadn't planned to stay there. Is that true? And she was like, yeah, I'm like on Monday, this was like a Saturday, on Monday I can make payroll. And it was speaking at but in this case this was a pitch competition, so it was competing, it was totally legitimate, but still, like, can't make cash flow on Monday, and I was like, and had raised like 2.5 million off a 3.5 million target or something, right? um and so I had raised money, had been successful, but this is somebody who'd raised an amount that for most people would be a big amount to raise,
Yeah.
and was almost bankrupt,
Yeah.
and this is normal in entrepreneurship, and most people are not aware of it, and I think it's extremely important to correct that.
Yeah, I'm watching the TV show Sopranos now. Have you watched it? The
A little
Sopranos.
bit, yeah. It's highly
Okay.
recommended to me, but I never got through it.
Okay. So I'm watching it, and it's like in the first season. I'm literally in the first season now. Um, like what we're speaking about is like therapy. It's like this guy was going through therapy. So like when you're going to events and when you're speaking about those challenges and those hardships with people who have the same hardships or even harder, and you don't even know about this. You thought that you are screwed. They may be way more screwed than you. Yeah, that's true. Um, uh, this is the type of therapy that entrepreneurs actually need, because when you are talking to other people without about all this stuff, and you understand that, okay, it's hard, it's not going to get easier for you, but they feel the same hardship, so they are sharing it. Again, this is what gives me peace of mind, and this is what you can get from the events. Again, it's like you are going there in hopes to sell something. You must be realistic about that. That's most likely not going to happen, but you still try, and this is still your road to success. Actually, you must still push yourself doing this. But what you can get there for real is you can get those very valuable conversations, those unique stories. I mean, everyone's story is unique, but you can get some really, really cool stories which sound surreal, but they are actually absolutely real. And this will work on you as some kind of therapy that will help you go through it and help you to accept this reality, and maybe make your life and suffering a little percentage less. And this is so important. We all need that, actually. Again, and by the way, you made a very good point that people who are not doing their own business, they may not be aware of that. I mean, I may be prejudiced, but it seemed to me that people who are not doing their own business always think about people who are doing their own business, that they're very rich. That's not the case. They usually have much more debt. And this is and you cannot really discuss those issues with them, like your friend who is I don't know, just an employee and doing some very specialized type of work and doesn't get much into business development. You cannot actually explain him that stuff because he doesn't share the same experience as you. And yeah, he's your friend, but he cannot share those hardships. And you need to talk to people like you. And business events is the place where you can find them, essentially. So that's like a very valuable thing that you can get there apart from your regular business activities. Just talking to people, hearing their stories, sharing your stories, maybe get some peace of mind, maybe get understanding that those hardships, they're not only yours, they're not uniquely yours. Other people share it, other people go through it. It may give you some internal strength.
Something else, if you're a very strategic thinker, you can do is identify trends and then identify the gaps in those trends. Okay, this is something that I find very useful. Is you can go there and see what everybody else is doing. Okay, and many of them are doing the idea you already thought about. Maybe they're already ahead of you, right? So either you need to change the idea a little bit to be less mainstream, or you need to go in a different direction or take a different approach, right? Because if you're doing what everybody else is doing, you're a commodity. And if you're a commodity, you're going to have a bad time, guaranteed.
Yeah. Yeah, but when you're doing something that no one else is doing, you are taking a risk. That's the point.
Absolutely. But if you take a risk, you have a potential of upside. If you're not taking a risk, guaranteed you're a commodity, right? The only way to stand out in a commodity market is to be really good at service or execution or delivery, and you can do that, and I highly recommend that. But it depends on what game you want to play. Do you want to play the game of execution, or do you want to play the game of like high upside potential with the right idea and things like that? But even if you're just focused on execution, you can at least, if I were just an execute, I said I will play in a commodity market and I will differentiate on execution. All right, I would go talk to both competitors and customers at that conference. Say, when you buy this sort of thing or when you sell this sort of things, what are the main problems? Or what are the guarantees you make to customers? What are the promises? Are things late? Are things? What are the big problems? What are, and make a note of all of those things, right? And you say, this is what's happening in my industry as a trend, right? For example, if we've talked about projects a little bit, software projects are usually late, okay?
Yes.
That is the norm
Yeah.
in that industry, okay? So that's something that's interesting, okay? And a construction projects are often late and often over budget, right? Those are the norms. Now, if something is the norm, and you can find a way to solve that in your business and you're playing in the same marketplace, you are going to stand out dramatically. If you can promise that you will not be late by more than 10 to 20% of the timeline, right? You can put some restriction or whatever you could, whatever kind of guarantee you can put in place, or you say we're able to keep to our timeline 90% of the time. If we don't meet it, you get half your money back, whatever. But if you can do things that are going to be much better and solve the common service delivery problems that people are having, you will again stand out because you're promising a much better experience for customers. So that's one way to differentiate. The other way is to say everybody's going east, let's go west. You know, I remember when we were talking about like voice AI and stuff, and everybody that I talked to who's doing some voice AI thing is talking about AI receptionists. I'm like, there's probably a lot of competition for AI receptionists
Yeah.
selling, right? And we came up with some other product ideas in the AI space that are far better, and we got actually much better response when we showed those because we understand that the 90% of people are building the same thing, right? And if we're in that 10% of people who are not building that, we have a much better ratio of product to customer, right? Product type to customer. So always you get a much better return if it's all about demand and supply, right? You always want to be in the right side of that equation. So you always want to be supplying things that are scarce and demanding things that are common. So you want to supply money. Money is scarce, right? Everybody, because the demand is for money is always more than the supply for money. Um, and you always want to supply things like free offers or free solutions, because again, the supply for those is lower than the demand is like very high for free and the supply is lower, right? And similarly, if you're presenting an offer that's uncommon, again, the demand might be hidden demand in the market and the supply is not much because it's not the thing everybody focuses on. You know, the only kind of exceptions to this are like pyramid schemes or things where like Bitcoin, where the more people who buy it, the more it goes up. So you should buy the thing that everybody else is buying, right? Um, but for most things, it does not work like that. You should not be doing the thing that everybody else is doing.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I think we
Yes.
can wrap up.
I think we will. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We talked about events and the trade-offs with different kinds of events and different kinds of things you can get from events and things that are more hard to get from events. But I think the thing to remember, like Igor said, also is like it's worth going if you've got the right understanding and the right focus. And if you're aiming to level up and learn and are open to seeing what happens, things may come of it. But if you need a predictable revenue growth strategy for your business, events are probably not the right play. And I would focus more on other channels for either talking to investors or um, talking to potential customers. And so I would continue to find a predictable path to doing that. And events are not likely to be that for you unless you can really differentiate in a very interesting way. And if for those of you who are going to be at Elevate, we look forward to seeing you there next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.